Welcome back to another bookmas video. Today's video is going to be, as you guys saw from the thumbnail, it's going to be 24 books that I've read and loved in 2024. So these are basically all of my top rated and favorite books of 2024, and I basically just made a list of 24 of them. So the funny thing is, I actually didn't really have to go out of my way to add or take away from this list. Basically, I had pretty much 24 books, but I am counting series as separate books. So with that being said, we'll just start off first and foremost with my top series so far, and that is An Ember in the Ashes series by Sabaa Tahir. For all of these books, even the ones that I have, I'm just going to pop up a picture of the book / series for the whole thing, just so that you guys can see while I'm talking pretty much the whole time, so you can see all of the books and everything. So the first 4 books that I'm counting in my top reads of 2024 is the Ember in the Ashes series, and I am counting all of the books individually because all 4 of these books were literally 5-star reads for me this year. All 4 of them were one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and they were just so good. The series was so good. If you guys have never heard of this series, it's a YA fantasy series. It has enemies to lovers, but honestly, it's not the typical enemies to lovers. I know when people say that trope, a lot of people kind of have a conception of what that means and of maybe what the book is about, and it is very different. So it's honestly very hard to describe, but the loose premise of the first book is that we have a main character. Her name is Laya, and in the very beginning of the book, her brother is basically being taken away by the government, and taken away to a very, very secure prison for she doesn't really know what. The main character doesn't really know why this is happening, what's going on. She doesn't even know who the good guys and the bad guys are. She doesn't know if her brother's good or bad, and so she doesn't really know who to trust. But as he's being taken away, she decides that she's going to try to help save him, basically. And so she runs into the resistance, where she is going to try to save her brother from the government, basically. That is a very, very loose premise of the first book. But honestly, all 4 books were so good and 100% 5-star reads for me. There were obviously a couple points through the second and third book that it kind of got just a little bit slow, but not I don't really know how to describe. It wasn't slow to the point where I was just oh my gosh, can we get where we're going? It was just slower than the very fast-paced parts of the book. So I don't really know how to explain that even the slow parts were exciting. So I absolutely loved those books, and those are probably top rated of this entire year. The next one is another series, and I'm very excited. I'm so happy that I've got a couple really good series under my belt this year, some really new series. That's very exciting to me. And this next one is one that I have basically not stopped talking about since I read it, and that is the Spark of the Everflame series. I think it's called the Everflame. I don't really know what the whole series is called, to be honest, but the first book is Spark of the Everflame, and there's Glow of the Everflame and Heat of the Everflame. Those 3 are the only 3 that are out so far. The 4th book was supposed to come out in July, and then some odd things. I don't know why it wasn't able to come out, but basically it did not get published in July, and so it got pushed back, and then there was an unknown release date, and then they canceled all pre-orders and everything, and they just said that they have no clue when the 4th book will be released, which is so sad. For anybody who read the 3rd book in this series, you know that it is very, very sad that the 4th book is being halted. But the first 3 books of the Spark of the Everflame series were 100% 3 of my top read books this year. The craziest part is I read them on my Kindle. So all 3 of these books are on Kindle Unlimited, and I read them on my Kindle. And I didn't even really pay attention to how long the books are. I probably would have told you that they're like 500 or 600 pages, right? Can't be longer than that. They're most definitely not. They're so much longer. The first book, I believe, is like 500 or 600 pages, and the other 2 are somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 pages. So they are long. These are not quick and short little books. These are long fantasy books. This is a series that you get invested in. This is a very, very high stakes, really fun fantasy series. With that being said, I did think that the first couple books were just a little predictable. So as fun and high stakes as it is, it's also really predictable. Like, you can kind of see things coming from like a mile away. And especially the further you get into the series, the more I felt that you could really, really start predicting what the main character was going to do. But I really don't think that that took away from my enjoyment of the series. Like, I seriously loved the series. I could not put it down. I binged it so quickly, and then I was devastated when it was over. And I talked about it literally so much that I had like 3 or 4 people pick up the series within like a couple months of me reading it, because I would not stop talking about it. And that is how you know. That is how you know that it's a top rated book or series, is when you don't shut up about it for so long that people around you are like, okay, she won't stop talking about this book, so it must be really good, so I need to pick this up and read it. Water break. The next book on this list. Now, this list is not particularly in any order. Like, I wouldn't say that those 2 that I just named, or I guess those 7 books that I just named, are not the top 7. Honestly, most of these books are probably tied for top 10 of the list, maybe even top 20. I really don't know. Some of these were just so good in their own ways that I don't even know that I could tell you, like, this one is better than that one. So with that being said, the next one I would say on the list is Crescent City 3. So Crescent City 3 is called House of Flame and Shadow. This book was released in January. I did a reread of Crescent City 1 and 2 in preparation for Crescent City 3. And man, was that the way to go, because by the time Crescent City 3 came out, I was honestly so excited for the book and so ready. Like, I had spent days just in this series catching back up, rereading the stories that I've already read before and all the things that I already know, just to like prepare for this big book that was coming out in January. And man, that it was just the best thing that I could have done, because I feel like I enjoyed Crescent City 3 more than I would have if I just like tried to go based off of memory. The last time I read the first 2 books was when Crescent City 2 came out, which was over a year before Crescent City 3 came out, which is normal. I'm not saying that that's like outrageously long. That's a normal amount of time for somebody to release fantasy books of this size and, you know, detail, I guess. But it just means that a lot of details I had forgotten by the time the 3rd book came out, but I reread them, and that was just really great. And Crescent City 3 was so good, and there honestly is not much I can say about it that doesn't spoil the first 2, so we're just going to leave it at Crescent City 3. And honestly, the whole series, but I didn't read the whole series this year. So I read the other 2 last year, or reread the other 2 last year. So I'm only counting the 3rd book as one of my 24 for this year. The next series is one that I very quickly fell in love with. I kept hearing about this one on social media, and basically I pretty much just loved it from the start, and that is Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. Both of these books were top books of this year. If I had to rank one over the other, I definitely enjoyed the first book a little bit more than I enjoyed the second book, but I mean, they were both great, and they definitely were both in the ranking for like top 24 books. They were so good. So Divine Rivals is a basically like historical fantasy. It takes place during the war times, and basically there's these two main characters. They are rivals in their work. So they're both writers, and they both want to write for this, I think it's a really great like newspaper, but I don't really remember exactly what the place that they're competing for the spot for. But basically our main character decides to become a war transpondent. So she wants to write and keep up with the war from the front lines because her brother's in the war and she hasn't heard from him in a while, and so she's trying to find him. That is literally all that I can say without giving away too much. But definitely, if you have not picked up Divine Rivals or Ruthless Vows, you should 100% pick that up this year. The next book, we're kind of switching gears here, so we're moving on from fantasy to romance. Although I think we'll probably jump back. Oh no. Yeah, we are sticking to romance for a little bit. So the next book is romance, and that is Out on a Limb. This book is by Hannah Bonham Young, and this is a, how do you even describe? Honestly, it's so hard to accurately describe how this book makes you feel, and so all anybody ever says is that it's an accidental pregnancy trope, which is true. It is an accidental pregnancy trope, but I feel like people always take that in like a negative connotation. Anybody that I've ever like listened to or watched or read, most people do not love that trope, but let me tell you, this book is so worth it. It feels very, I don't know, it just felt very like raw, and I don't know. Hannah Bonham Young just has a way of just taking really serious situations and writing the cutest, homiest rom-com type story around a very serious situation, but also taking the situation very seriously. So like there are warnings in the beginning of her books that some like topics that are talked about in each book might, be a little bit triggering to some people, or, things like that. And I just feel like she does a really great job of mixing the happy rom-com feeling with very serious topics. And so I really loved that. Moving on, the next one was the only one that was technically a reread for 2024. I'm already jumping ahead to next year. And please don't come at me with this one. I know that it was a reread, so I had read it before, but I basically read this book with new eyes because the first time I read it, I just didn't do it. It just wasn't the same. Okay. So this is one of my best reads of 2024, and I was trying to keep rereads off of this, but this is the only one that is a reread, and I'm counting it because this is a 5-star read, and that is Happy Place by Emily Henry. Guys, I have a reading vlog out of me reading Happy Place, and I highly recommend going and watching that video because the way that I just completely fell for this book and these characters again. Like, why didn't I like it the first time? I don't know. I think I was insane because I loved it the second time. I mean, 5-star favorite Emily Henry. This book, the second time around, beat Beach Read. And I have read Beach Read like 3 times. So the fact that Happy Place beat Beach Read for my top Emily Henry book is insane. Like, I cannot get over it. I literally can't get over it, and I cannot stop thinking and just loving these characters. So a loose general synopsis of this book is there's a group of about 6-ish friends. I say about because, you know, throughout the years, like, when it goes to flashbacks, it's like a smaller group of friends, but throughout the years they get girlfriends and boyfriends. And so the group kind of grows and they lose people, but it's about 6 people. And every year they used to go to one of the girls' dad's like lake house type place, like beach house. And they, 2 of the friends in the friend group are our main characters, and they used to date, and they were actually engaged at one point, but they had recently broke off the engagement, and none of their friends know that they broke off the engagement. So when they're asked to come back for a weekend getaway, they have to pretend that they're still engaged and happily in love with one another. So it is like a second chance romance, fake dating. Not really. I guess fake dating is like, it definitely is. It's a second chance romance, fake dating. I don't know. I can't really think of the other plots. It's definitely found family. It's just so lovely and wonderful. And if you're going to pick up any Emily Henry, I suggest picking up Happy Place. This was just chef's kiss, my favorite Emily Henry book. Moving on to the next one, and that is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. Done and Dusted has been out for a little while now because the 3rd book actually just came out. But Done and Dusted is actually the first small town country cowboy romance that I have absolutely loved. I tried the Chestnut Spring series and I just didn't really love that series. We're not going to get into it because that's not what this video is about. But all that to say, I've tried a couple of like small town romances and they're okay, but none of them I love the way I love Done and Dusted. This book was just so good. It was everything I hoped for, and that's really all I'm going to say. That just go read it. Go read Done and Dusted. Next is another series, and I counted all 3 of these books separately because I read all 3 of them this year and absolutely loved all 3 of them. And that is the Part of Your World series by Abby Jimenez. This series is Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and Just for the Summer are the 3 books. And they are technically a series because all of them are connected in some way. But if you read them, you can read them as standalones, and you're not going to be like confused or lost or not know what is going on. Like, you'll totally understand, but you won't feel the same way as you would if you just read them all 3 in order. So the first book is it's an age gap romance. It is a class difference. So one of them is a lot wealthier than the other one. One comes from a big city and the other is from small town, that type of thing. So that is really all I'm going to say about the synopsis of the first one, and I don't really want to give away the other ones just in case anybody wants to read them in order. So all I'm going to talk about is that first one, Part of Your World. But all 3 of them, I actually read them out of order. So I will say I read Yours Truly first, and then Just for the Summer, and then went back and read the first one. I did not realize that there was an order to them. And so I picked up Yours Truly in the beginning of the year. And then I saw that she was releasing just for the summer. And I picked that one up from Book of the Month, not knowing that they were part of the same series. And I read that one. And then when I found out that they were part of a series, I went back and reread the first one, and everything made sense. It connected all of the dots. And now I tell people, please go read them in order, because it really does make a difference, and you'll feel so differently about the series if you just go read them in order. So that's all I'm going to say. The next book is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This one is a small town romance. Basically, this is kind of like the grumpy sunshine trope. So yeah, this is small town sunshine girl meets grumpy security guy. Like, he's the security guy. He is security for a like famous superstar that lives in the city, and he's like the bad boy, tattooed up. He's the grump. He's like known for just being like this broody, grumpy guy, and she is just a little ray of sunshine. Like, everybody thinks she's just so innocent, and she would never fall for somebody like that, covered up in tattoos and all that. And it is just so dang cute. You just would not even believe how much I absolutely loved and adored every second of this book. I swear, this was one of my favorite romances of this year. So yes, that is that. The last romance for 2024 that's on this list is The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. So I have talked about this one on my channel before as well. This one actually shocked me with how much I loved the story. This is about a woman who, her dad is very ill and has been for a long time. And so she has put her career as wanting to be a screenwriter to the side to take care of her dad for pretty much indefinitely, until she gets basically the call of a lifetime, where she has the opportunity to work with her all-time favorite screenwriter to help him write a rom-com. And so she takes the opportunity, goes all the way to California, I believe, to help this screenwriter, her favorite screenwriter of all time, help him rewrite this script of a rom-com. And little does she know, he didn't even know that she was coming, or that he needed to rewrite the script at all. So this is also kind of a grumpy sunshine, and it was just very, very cute. I also loved this book. I read this book so quickly because I could not put it down. Like, the moment that I picked it up, and I was pretty much invested from the very start to the very end, and there was like no slow part to me. Like, I was pretty much just in it the whole time, fully invested, and I just needed to know what was going to happen, and I absolutely loved it. Definitely a top rated romance of this year. One that I actually forgot to say for fantasy is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Reckless is the second book in the Powerless trilogy. So the third book will be coming out next year, which is 2025. And there is a novella that is like a 1.5. So it comes in between the first book and the second book. But Reckless came out in 2024, and I obviously I can't really say very much at all about the plot, because the first book leaves off with kind of a big plot, like a big cliffhanger, and if I say pretty much anything about the second book, it kind of spoils the first. But the Powerless series is a young adult fantasy series that honestly I'm not going to be very good at explaining it. So all I can say is highly recommend. I absolutely love the why am I like stumbling on my words? The Powerless series, Powerless and Reckless, but Powerless I read last year. So Reckless is on my list of top 24 books for this year, for sure. It was very good. I definitely loved it, and I cannot wait for book 3. So now moving on, we're going to move on to, I have a couple historical fictions that made the list this year, and anybody who watches my videos regularly will know that this is not a shocker. So the 3 historical fiction books that I have are The Nightingale, The Great Alone, and The Women. These books are all by Kristen Hanna, and when I tell you that Kristen Hanna got me into reading historical fiction in a way that I never thought that I would, it's literally been amazing. This year has been so great for branching out and reading different things in different genres. And I've found 3 books in historical fiction that all were in my top 24 books of the year. The Nightingale was absolutely phenomenal. The Great Alone was so good and so devastating. And honestly, the plot twist just kept coming. Like, there was not a single point that I was like, oh yeah, I called that. Like, every single plot point I was shocked by, and I just did not see coming. And I was so invested from beginning to end. And then The Women is her newest book that just came out this year. And The Women was phenomenal, and that was a story that takes place during the Vietnam War. And it's basically a story about the women who served in the Vietnam War and how they were treated afterwards. And honestly, all 3 of these books just helped me to see what it was like in a different time, in different circumstances, in different places. They all take place in all different places around the world. And they were just phenomenal. You can tell that Kristen Hanna does so much research. She puts her heart and soul into every single book, and you can tell by her writing and just by her characters, the way that you can just completely fall for a character in a way that if they, none of Kristen Hanna's characters are safe. It is historical fiction, and they all pretty much take place around like war times. And when you lose a character in one of her books, I'm telling you, I've sobbed during one of her books in a way that I don't think I've ever really sobbed during a book before. So I love Kristen Hanna, and I was so excited and happy to add her to this list. Then we only have 2 more books on this list. The next one is a literary fiction, and that is this lovely book right up here, and that is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This book honestly caught me so off guard. I had no clue that this would be on my 2024 best books of the year, and I'm honestly not mad about it at all. This book was so wholesome. It was so sweet. The found family was beautiful. The book was just amazing. And who would have thought that it's a book that literally the narrator is an octopus? Like, literally, I would have never guessed. But I absolutely loved it. And I highly, highly recommend, honestly, anybody read this book. I don't care what you like to read, what your life circumstances are. Like, you can be a 16-year-old that typically reads romance, or you could be a 40-year-old who only reads, I don't even know, fantasy for all I care. But like, I literally think that anybody could enjoy this book. It's just so beautiful. It was beautifully written, and I just absolutely loved it. And my final book, not my final book because it's my least favorite, just my final book because it's the last one on my list. But the last book that I have for my favorite books of 2024 is Listen for the Lie. This book is a thriller, and I talked about this in the very beginning of the year. This was actually one of the first books I read this year, and this thriller was so good. I swear this was probably one of my favorite thrillers I've ever read. It had me hooked from the very start to the very end. It was perfectly lengthed, so it was not too long, but it was not super short. It was right in that sweet spot, right in the middle, and it was it's like a podcast style audiobook. So the book, it's Listen for the Lie, and basically it is this podcast host kind of going over a real life murder and situation, and with the main suspect of the crime. And this book was just so, it was just so good. Like, I just really didn't see most of the plot twists coming, and I really, really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend. And I specifically highly recommend listening to the audiobook for this one, because whenever the audiobook would play any of the podcast episodes, they actually recorded it to sound like a real podcast. So I swear this was the most immersive This was the most immersive audiobook I've probably ever read. And it was just so good. And I just loved it. I really just loved it. It was definitely a highly, highly rated book for this year. I loved it, and I highly recommend. So that's it. That is it for my 24 best books of 2024. That is a tongue twister. But thank you so much for joining me on another day of Bookmas. And I hope to see you guys very soon. Bye.